For some reason, I think that Hawk would like strawberry ice cream or something crazy like that.
A man called Hawk is jazzy.
A man called Hawk is a cool guy in Washington, D.C.
A man called Hawk is the Dixon Hill of Captain Benjamin Sisko.
Ooh, good knowledge. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fallingtower's Watch the First podcast in which we watch the first episode of a series so that you don't have to.
But you still can.
You still can. Today, you guessed it, we are doing A Man Called Hawk, a blast from the past, 1989. This is Fantasy Month, but we're taking a break from Fantasy Month for the very first ever, the Sisko Day. So you can't do a fantasy show on the Sisko Day. You got to pay tribute to the Sisko, the man himself, Mr. Avery Brooks. And this was recommended to us by Sirach Lofton. So Sirach, This one is for you. He recommended this to us when he was on this show previously. So let's get into it. Of course, everybody knows the co-captain. He is wearing the Sisko family shirt. It's got all the Sisko people in there. You got to love it. He is the vice provost for academic affairs at Duke University. He's also an occasional science advisor for Star Trek. Cool dude. Dr. Muhammad Noor.
Hello, it was a pleasure to be on Fallingtower's Watch the First of Things.
He's also a evolutionary geneticist or
very good
biologist. Yep.
Rico
E. Anderson is also here. He's an actor, and you see him in sci-fi stuff, dramatic stuff. He's been flown out to faraway countries out in Europe back in the day to like shoot cool things. He's a great actor. Cast him in anything, Mr. Rico E. Anderson.
Hello. Welcome. Well, thank you for welcoming me back. Honored to always be here.
Always welcome.
Can't say a sentence to save my life, but here we are.
However, we've seen him hosting award shows. We've seen him being funny on commercials. We've seen him being an action type hero or a bad guy. This guy can do anything except for...
He's even in Modern Family.
That's right.
Whoa.
The Sisko family is the Modern Family. My name is Ryan T. Husk, and that's all you need to know about that.
Ryan's very cool. Come on.
Yeah, whatever, some say.
Actor, host, cool dude, lover of all things Trek.
Sports fan,
generous guy.
Big time. All right, so let's get into this. Everybody at home, if there is a fantasy show you'd like us to review in the comments below, just type that fantasy show and tell us where we can find it, or make your suggestions for June. June's up in the air, so if you want us to review a show, let us know. But Sirach, this one is for you. You suggested this one.
Love Sirach.
Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you like this video. Give us a 5-star rating if you're able to, and share this around. Tell everybody. So they can also watch this video. Let's get into it. It's my favorite part of the show. That's why we start off with it. But what's it called, Muhammad?
It's a predicament, where we predict what each other thought of the show after they watched it.
Somehow I knew you might say that. All right. So Muhammad and I have known each other for a few years, but very closely. We've interacted quite a bit, so we know each other pretty well. Rico and I have known each other for 10 years this October, so we're very close to that 10-year maniversary.
That's crazy that you have it down to the month.
Yeah.
Oh, I have it down to the week. It's like October 5th or 6th, 4th, 5th or 6th. It's right around there.
Like Vulcan.
Of 2013.
We may have to come back to this in the interview stage to understand this better.
All right.
Romance.
So the point is, we know each other fairly well. Muhammad, I predict that you enjoyed this show. I predict that you've never seen it before, but you do remember it being around in 1989. You were aware of it. And so I think you enjoyed it. Rico, I think you had seen this show. Maybe you haven't seen every episode, but I think you tuned in before. I think you may have even seen Spencer for Hire in the past. And I think you like this. I think it reminded you of the good old days. and you had a good time, and you loved Mr. Avery Brooks in it. Those are my predictions. What do you say, Mohammed?
Ryan, my guess is you had not seen the show before. I think you're gonna come off positive, but not like 9 or 10 positive. Like positive. Rico, yeah, I think similar to Ryan, I think you probably at least were very aware of it if you hadn't actually watched it directly. But I think you're gonna also be, again, positive, but not like 9 or 10 positive.
I just like that he said niner. What about you, Rico? What are your predictions?
Excuse me. Ryan T. Husk, I think that you have seen this show. And I think that wait, what are we doing? We've seen it, and if we liked it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, just make your predictions, whatever you want.
I predict that you've seen this show, and I predict that that you did like it when you saw it. And I also predict that you've never seen it before. Like when it came out back in the day. Mohammed, I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that you have seen the show, and you liked it because of some of the similarities that are there, and some of the things that just bring some of the nostalgia of what we know of Cisco today to light. So, and I also predict that you liked it.
All right, everybody. Those are our predictions. That's some helpful hints, or maybe not so helpful. So in the live chat right now, or in the comments below, make your predictions. Do you think I liked it? Do you think Dr. Noor liked it? Do you think Rico E. Anderson liked it? Let us know what you think. Take your time. No rush. Mohammed here is going to tell us what this show is even about, and buy you a little bit of time to type away.
I will indeed. So, in this spin-off from the series Spencer for Hire, Man for Hire Hawk, played by the amazing Avery Brooks, has returned home to Washington, D.C. after years away. But he's not the only one who's returned. His former trainee from the Army, Trax, has also returned to be near his daughter. But Trax is suffering from PTSD and paranoia from being used as a hitman for the military for so long. A mysterious Colonel asks Hawk to find Trax, which Hawk does grudgingly and on his own terms. Trax ends up killing many people, including Colonel. In a climax scene, Hawk pleads with Trax to get help, but ends up having to hurt him to stop it. Trax ends up taking his own life rather than being at the mercy of others.
Yeah, that was weird. That part was weird.
All right. So now, everybody, you're going to start to get some answers bit by bit in a segment we like to call
Expectations. We spend a little bit of time on what you expected before you watched the show, and then more time on what you getchin'. Got it.
Sorry,
Rico.
No, you've been on this show like 15 times, Rico. We're going to compare and contrast what we expected versus what we got. So at first, we're only going to say, Rico, what we expected, and then we'll dive all into a little bit more.
I got all that. I was wondering about these punches that Dr. Muhammad was.
He's a violent guy.
Yeah, this is where I get it out.
That's
because he has to bite his lip all day long when he's teaching students. He has to be like, very good answer. That's a great question. And then when he gets home, he's just like, oh my God. Yeah, great job, Susie.
I get around those nerds. Oh, bang, zoom.
Nah, our students are great.
Kapow. All right. So, Mohammed, before you watch this first episode of A Man Called Hawk, entitled, forgot to say the title, The Master's Mirror.
Yeah.
What did you expect, if anything?
So I had for sure seen Spencer for Hire several times. I mean, I don't think I watched it like weekly as it came out, but it's one of those things that if it was on, I would always watch it as a kid. I actually don't remember if I saw this show. I mean, I certainly knew who Hawk was from Spencer for Hire, so I was familiar with him from that. Maybe I'd seen this, but I mean, since it was a direct spinoff and it was only one season, I honestly just don't remember if I'd seen it or not. So coming in, this week, when I was preparing for this show, I remembered Hawk was something kind of like a hitman or an informant or something. There's like basically sort of, I couldn't remember exactly if it was investigator versus hitman or what sort of thing he was doing in that context, but he was definitely somebody with like, he was savvy about what was going on in the world very generally. That I remembered. But in terms of the plot for this, like where was he coming from? Where was he going? Yeah, I had no recollection of that. So I figured it was going to be something kind of dramatic. And the picture that's behind everybody definitely, it doesn't look like it's going to be like a love story or anything. So I didn't think it was going to be along those lines, but that's where I started.
Well then, Rico, before you watched this first episode of A Man Called Hawk, what did you expect, if anything?
So I do remember the Spencer for Hire series. And because of that, I already knew what Hawk was like in terms of his demeanor and just who he was, what he was all about, how he got down and all that. But it's been a minute. And so one of the things that I expected was, from what I remembered, was, the just the cool character that he was, who had this kind of Shaft-like attitude about him. And just that coolness, confidence, but also so not only a continuation of who he is, but some sort of progression based on the fact that now he's back home, now he's in a different environment, and as a result, we're going to get what we got from Spencer for Hire, but we're going to see even more of the real type of Hawk that you knew if you actually saw him in that old show. So I expected Hawk, but more, like an opportunity to really grow beyond what is already known from the character.
All right. Well, interesting. I'll tell you what I expected, if anything. I had not seen A Man Called Hawk before. I had not seen Spencer for Hire before. I think I remember the name Spencer for Hire. Like, I remember it existing. Maybe it kind of sounds familiar. A Man Called Hawk also kind of maybe vaguely sounds familiar, but it might just be that it's been mentioned since then many times. But back then, I don't know. I don't think so. So I was going into this blind. I was assuming that it was something serious, but I didn't know, are they private investigators? Are they hitmen? Are they cops? Are they mafiosos? Or, what side they're on? No idea, but I knew it was going to be probably something in that realm, because all the shows, I feel like in the 80s were like that. There was Hardcastle and McCormick. There was Hunter and Remington Steele and Cagney and Lacey. I don't know what any of these are, but I just MacGyver was just cool. He made stuff. Anyway, it made us all think that we could do something.
Magnum PI.
Yeah,
that's true.
So anyway, so really didn't know what to expect, other than I knew it was going to be in that kind of vague genre of dramatic and, underbelly of society kind of thing, possibly. Anyway, that's what we expected. Dr. Muhammad Noor, what did we actually get, or you personally?
Yeah, I'll say, for speaking for me personally, actually, your description just now was very eloquent. I'm going to actually reference that right now. I had a very different opinion for the first half of the episode versus the second half of the episode. So the things you just mentioned at the beginning here in the first half, like, was he a good guy? Was he a mafioso? Was he a PI? I couldn't tell that in the first half of the episode. I found myself very confused just a lot all throughout the very first half of the episode. I couldn't tell what people's roles were. And it seemed like it was almost assuming that we had just finished watching Spencer for Hire, and I remembered exactly what this person was doing. Which, I mean, yes, I watched it, but that was also like 40 years ago. So I don't remember exactly what he was doing in there. I just remember he was kind of a cool guy and he was out on the streets and doing things. But I didn't remember if he was on his own, or if he was a bad guy or a good guy, or if he was one of those anti-hero sorts of people. But it wasn't even just him. I mean, there were things happening that I was just having a hard time following. Like, Trax had this interaction with these guys, and then he goes into the bathroom, and then all of a sudden he's trying to escape, and all of a sudden he's coming back and trying to kill them. Like, what's happening? Like, I just found myself very, very lost in there. Also, I have to say that I didn't think there were some other things which I found confusing, like this interaction between Bailey, is that the Angela Bassett character? The interaction between Bailey and that
Bailey
student
Webster.
of hers. It was kind of odd. Like the interaction, they seemed much closer to teacher and student, which was kind of throwing me off. Like, what is that? And also just this magic around tracks, how he'd like be here and all of a sudden be over there. Like, okay. So actually, the first half, I found myself looking at my watch and I was like, what am I doing? Why is this not as good as I thought it would be? Second half, by the time I suddenly figured, well, I wasn't set, but by the time I figured everything out, I actually enjoyed it a lot. I felt that the storyline was captivating. Like, oh, I see what's happening now. Oh, this is really interesting. Oh, the dialogue is really good. Oh, and the climax scene I thought was very powerful. And actually, it was funny at the very end when it was all wrapped up. I remember thinking like, wait, so who was it who was sent to go kill Trax? And right then there was this reveal of what had happened earlier. So it was actually very well timed. I thought Brooks's acting was fantastic, which you would expect always. I thought it was much more mixed for the rest. Like I thought, God, Lisa. I mean, I think I could have acted better than her. No offense to her, but I actually looked up to see like, has she ever acted before? She'd only been on like 3 shows or 4 shows before, so she was very early stage in acting. And I saw she actually didn't act anymore for the next 10 years after this.
That's the daughter, right?
Yeah, the daughter, exactly.
Pianist.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll stop talking from there. But yeah, my opinion changed dramatically for the second half after the first half.
Rico E. Anderson, your opinion changes every day, I think. What did you actually get upon viewing this first episode of A Man Called Hawk?
Since the last time we talked, my opinion started changing every hour. So, yeah. What was cool that I got that I liked was, how you go home and from being wherever it is you were before, and you start, the real you comes out, or the more comfortable you comes out. I saw that within Hawk, him coming home, him being around, seemingly the people that he grew up with or just had a lot of deep history with. So caught that and got a lot of that, got a lot of him just being within his people and being able to really be even more of the cool cat that we knew if we were to see Spencer, and really a more real version of who Hawk really is. We got, excuse me, I really, really liked Bondi Curtis Hall's character in this and their interaction as well. That was cool.
Who was that?
I just really...
Oh, Tracton. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a solid actor anyway. He's always a wonderful actor to see. We got a lot of Black culture within this episode, and I'm saying in terms of things like how they were quoting, doing a lot of famous quotes. They quoted Frederick Douglass. They referenced, I forgot what the book was that they mentioned in the beginning.
Souls of Black Folk.
Souls of Black Folk.
By W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yes. A lot of, that was major study when it comes to like Black history and books to read and to be aware of. Him just sitting up in a jazz club, listening to jazz and taking that in.
There was clothes too.
Say it again.
There's clothes too.
Yeah, well, the clothes were a trip because I actually had a coat like that, so it big puffy coat. So that's what I got out of it. I got a lot of culture. I got a lot of more of Hawk than we were already exposed to if we've seen previous versions of him as well.
Well, I'll tell y'all what I actually got upon viewing this first episode of A Man Called Hawk. My first thought was, I don't know what the heck is going on here. Should I have watched Spencer for Hire? Because I don't know. So I didn't know if I didn't know if I was lost because I hadn't watched Spencer for Hire, or if I was lost because that's what the writers intended. sometimes they want you to start off lost and then they start explaining it bit by bit as the episode progresses. So I assumed that it could be either one, and either one of those is fine. And so I just was like, okay, I don't know what the heck's going on. I'm halfway through this, no idea, but I'm just enjoying it. And what I really enjoyed, like Rico said, I felt like I was immersed in Black culture. I felt like I was kind of thrown into a time warp where I was getting, 1989, but there was references that were predating 1989. So it almost felt timeless. It almost felt like a lot of the vernacular was from the 70s, it felt like. Mm-hmm. And there was such interesting speak. The dialogue was interesting. And it felt like modern day for 89, modern day poetry. Like the writers were writing something poetic. Sure, they could write things how everybody speaks, but that's boring. They wrote things that were colorful, that were interesting, that evoked thoughts. Like my favorite was when Hawk said, "Behold, he lives still," or something like that. I'm like, who talks like that? Hawk does. That's who. So I just, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I liked how artsy it was. I liked the culture of it all. It felt like an education, but a fun education, because I don't like to be educated unless I choose to be educated, or unless it's fun. And it was great. So I had a lot of fun with it. But I wanted to ask Rico, because Rico, when I was watching, I was like, oh, this is the perfect guy to have on our show for this, because you're very knowledgeable in actors and older shows. And you always go, oh, that's this guy. And I'm like, who's that? And they're like, he was the guy that was in that movie. I'm like, who's that? Or what's that? And you go, the movie with this person, that person. I'm like, I don't know who those people are, but you know them all.
Guy who was in that.
So yeah, the guy you mentioned, Vondi, who played Tracton, aka Trax, he was very recognizable and he was very good. And you just mentioned that he was great. Had you seen him in other things, or what's his story? Because clearly this was somebody that's pretty well established.
Vondi Curtis Hall is he's been in a ton of things. He's kind of like that guy who was in That Thing type of actor. He's done a ton of stuff, well recognized in a lot of Black films and TV shows, things like that. Ironically, he was not ironically, but he was, one of his more recent things was he was in the Daredevil series.
Yeah, I see that now.
Mm-hmm. That was on Netflix, and actually playing a character who lived and worked in Hell's Kitchen, and they kind of switched things around with his character in relation to what he is in the comics. But he's just overall in general just an actor that's just been around and has worked very extensively. And if I'm not mistaken, he was very prominent in theater as well.
Mm-hmm. So, did you notice that there was a Jadzia Dax character in this show? Quite the reference, since this predated Deep Space Nine. There was a character played by Moses Gunn that appears in 10 episodes, and his character name was Old Man.
See, I was about to ask, did we ever actually hear what his name was? See, I remember him from Little House on the Prairie, but I don't know, did they ever say his name?
He's Old Man throughout the whole series, and I was like, oh, I love that. Obviously not a deliberate reference, but still cool.
It's too bad, there was no part, and maybe, I don't know, maybe in some of the future episodes where he just looks at him and he goes, "Thanks, Old Man."
Yes.
Oh, that would have been perfect. Oh my god.
Oh, he always lowers his voice when he's like,
with a little wry smirk.
Yeah.
It's fun.
That would have been great.
Moses Gunn is another legendary actor who's done a lot. Who actually, I referenced Shaft. He was in Shaft, and A Man Called Hawk has it's very Shaft-like in terms of the character and just who he is and him seeking justice. And in a weird way, it's very kind of a precursor to Samuel Jackson's Shaft. Let's just get it out there. And and because his shaft was bald, and
you gonna be okay, Rico?
I'm working it out. Just bear with me. And he had like the hair, the goatee, and how you guys doing out there in the live comments?
Yeah.
So it was interesting. It was kind of cool. You're like, oh, that's kind of like a precursor to Shaft. But yeah, Moses Gunn was in Shaft, and it's funny. You look at if you look at I cheated a little bit. Looked at the IMDb list. A lot of actors who have been on this show. A lot of Black actors who are still doing it, or if they haven't passed, or have been very prominent in the making of this first season. And
Bondi looks like he's still working.
Bondi is still working. And you know what's crazy? I've always looked at Bondi Curtis Hall, and he always reminds me slightly of my dad, the look of him. And I didn't grow up with my dad, but towards the end of his life, he and I, we reconnected, and we were able to have a relationship. And I mentioned it to him one time, and he just kind of looked at me and he was like, I don't see it, but I could see how that could possibly be a thing. I was like, okay, but yeah, it was interesting. So it's always great to see him for all the reasons above, but also just because of that resemblance.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have a favorite character besides the obvious Hawk?
I mean, really, like Rico said, I love Trax. I thought just the performance of him was so good in that sense. I mean, I didn't like some of the specifics he was doing, like the magic thing, but I thought the way he executed what he was doing was fantastic. So that was very good.
Same here. I was super drawn toward him, and just what he was doing, just very solid acting. I mean, I was very drawn to it, and just everything he was doing, and loved it. It's always great to see the nostalgia of like, hey, there's Angela Bassett, or Moses Gunn, who, if you know his history, you've seen him and stuff. So it's always great to see people's early history.
Yeah, I really liked him too. Especially, I mean, he really got probably the most airtime besides Hawk too. So it's easy to really like him. But you loved his performance. Really interesting character, multi-layered. When Angela Bassett popped up, I was like, wait a minute, is that a young? It is her. I was like, wait a minute.
Like,
wow. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. It was good to see her, but we didn't see a ton of her. So yeah, definitely Trachton was cool. Whereas
I felt the acting was kind of bimodal. I don't know if you guys felt that way. Like I thought, Trax was excellent. I thought, Bailey was great.
Top heavy.
Cisco. Yeah, but then there was the other folks like Colonel, all them, like, and Lisa. I'm like, okay, like I didn't feel like their performances were as compelling.
Yeah,
and maybe they just didn't like maybe they weren't connecting with the material they were given. Maybe it wasn't just something about ability, but I definitely felt like it was kind of bimodal.
That's nerd talk for some good and some bad.
Yeah,
but I like how you go bimodal like this, like you're showing us a graph too. I love it. You're picturing a graph when you're saying it. I'm like, I got you. I know what you're saying there. I love
everybody in the live chat. Do this.
Yeah, it's a graph. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Were there some moments that made you laugh? There were a few for me. A lot of times what made me laugh was, I'm not even sure if they were meant to be funny. They were just so fun to hear or so fun to see that it made me laugh. Like when the car kind of attacked them and there was a guy hanging out and shooting, and then he gets shot and he just goes, like he didn't react. Yeah. He was just like, I'm shooting, I'm dead. That was fun. It brought me back to the 80s though. I'm like, I love that feel, and I loved that Hawk had like this long ass revolver or whatever the gun was. It had like that long, that looked so cool. I loved the way Avery Brooks said things, because he doesn't just say things how they're written. He likes to add a little bit of jazzy flavor, like need every edge to win. He drags out a word here or there to make it really cool. But you were going to say something, Muhammad?
Yeah, I had two of them, and they both were with Avery Brooks. And it was kind of in the same scene, like when he had beaten up the two guys, and he dragged the guy into the club, and somebody said something like, "It's a private club," and I can't remember exactly what he said. But he says like, "Well, make me a reservation," and he kept moving, and then the guy
No,
asked,
he said that's great because I want to be kept private or something. I'm gonna go in and I want to be private or something like that.
Or something. And then the other one is like, "Where's my other guy?" He's at the dentist. That was awesome.
Also, when his friend died, or he believed he was, he says, "It pains me that he is dead." I'm like, it doesn't look like it, but I love. It's just so funny the way he would say things where it was like kind of half tongue in cheek, kind of half serious, and he delivers them in a way where he's basically saying, "I don't want you to know how I truly feel about things, and I want you to know that I don't want you to know how I feel about things." It's kind of like he wants you to know that there's this wall there and that you can't figure him out. And so that was a lot of fun. Also thought it was kind of funny to tell a guy that was just recently had his life shattered and he's thrown in a wheelchair to be like, "Hey, life is still gorgeous."
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey," and the kid's like, "Maybe for you." I mean, he didn't say that.
I understood what the purpose of that plot was, even honestly. It felt like just a tack on,
Maybe.
Yeah. It needed to fill 10 seconds.
But I like that he threw a history book on him. There was a message there of like, hey, one door closes, but there are plenty of other doors that you could consider opening. Anyway, what do you think, Rico? Some things make you laugh?
Well, I love the cheesy 80s, early 90s music that it's always going to be just classic, just because like in the beginning you hear the bass,
oh my god, I loved it.
The
music, the music was in my soul. The music was just taking me away, man. I loved it.
It was the best. It was the best. And yeah, when certain things were said, certain like, well, get me an application. As he's like,
that was
yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, this is a club. This is private goal. Well, get me an application. So he pushes dude in. Love that stuff because it's very reminiscent of like Terminator, where there were all these puns, and it's just like you've just been erased or you've just been terminated. Hasta la vista, all of that, and you're seeing this stuff as it's happening. Yeah, that was funny. I'm trying to think what else. Just again, the Shaft influence and just how they're really tapping into that whole thing, and yeah, I did notice also just kind of the difference in acting in terms of who's really bringing it, who's seemingly still kind of working it out, and you can definitely tell. And it actually kind of reminds me a lot of like 70s type movies where you can see who's a good actor, and you can see whose IMDb is not that strong as after that particular thing. So,
last thing I want to toss in there, because there are so many things that I enjoyed. They either made me happy, they made me laugh, or they just impressed me. One was a really interesting acting choice, and I choose to believe it was an acting choice. There was a character named Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And
one was with Colonel,
yeah, Freeman. And when Hawk speaks to him, and kind of tersely, he calls him "free man."
I noticed that, yeah.
And I'm like, I
didn't actually catch that was his name at first. I thought it was just like he was calling
there.
That.
He's calling this dude "free man," and there's a lot behind that, and I can only imagine that was an actor's choice, and it's a brilliant one. Freaking loved it. I can't imagine the writers necessarily thought of that when they wrote that line, but I feel like that was probably an Avery choice because that seems like his style. Really smart, and I loved it. I was like, ooh, he pronounced it "free man," and he really hit both those words. Really cool.
I'd like to add on to that. I can't remember which one of you said it, but you were referencing how Avery says certain things and how he'll put like little buttons on it. And I can't remember what the line was, but he said something. I think he was talking to Angela, I'm not sure, but he kind of ended whatever his dialogue with was. It was with like he'd be like blah 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 blah,
Yeah.
and then he
Or
just
he would
keep
go, ah. Like he just
yeah.
added these little grunts here and there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you got some of that from Cisco. You know, you got those little isms that
Mhm.
just really signify who Avery was.
Mhm.
So
Well said.
very good stuff. Rico, it's time to talk about you for a moment, if that's okay with you, because you're also a great actor in your own right.
Can I ask a question first there about Rico?
Yeah, please.
So what happened in October 10 years ago?
Oh, we swore we'd never speak on that.
Oh.
You swore. I didn't.
Damn it.
No, let him know. We were working on Star Trek Renegades, right?
It's that project.
Yeah, and I was Boras in the movie, and you, Ryan, you were rocking the makeup.
Makeup of and continuity supervisor. So I was just sitting there with a big old binder taking a million. Who knew that there was this much makeup and makeup effects involved in a sci-fi thing with a ton of aliens?
It is
shooting everything so far out of order. So I just had like a binder full, and I was just taking a million notes and taking a million pictures of everything. And Rico was made up like some big, cool, awesome alien. And
we just, we met there, and just I just remember after it was done, just kind of just really reminiscing on how cool it was, and I guess I saw you on Facebook, and people you should know or something, and I was like, I remember that guy. I hate that guy, but I'm gonna have that. And no, I love him. And so just the friendship started there, and we ended up working on other projects together, and
we became very good friends very quickly. And to be honest, it's completely Rico's fault. He was very
I'll take it.
He contacted me. He was super friendly. He was super nice. And I'm like, what did I ever do to this guy to make him so nice to me? Turns out that's just Rico. He's just a good guy. So we became very good friends very quickly. And again, Rico gets all the credit for that. I certainly didn't deserve it, but he didn't know that. And he was cool. So thanks for the friendship, Rico. It's all you. And tell us, please, Rico, by the way, fast forward a bit, what's new in your world?
Well, thank you for your friendship as well, my good friend. And it's a lot going on in the world of Rico E. Anderson. My show of 3 years, Truth Be Told, the show that's on Apple TV Plus that I play Herbie on, just ended its 3-year run. The show has been canceled, but it will forever live on Apple TV Plus. So I always say, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a wonderful show starring Octavia Spencer, Mekhi Phifer, Ron Cephas Jones, Tracy Thomas, myself as Herbie. It will forever live on Apple TV Plus. The show that I was on, SWAT, was canceled last Friday, but then renewed that Monday.
Oh,
wow.
Like that quick. Like it was we got the cancellation announcement. Shamar Moore, who stars on the show, got on Instagram and was like, "What the fuck?" And through that, and just people going, "What the fuck?" They ended up going on ahead and bringing it back. So SWAT will live for another season, and so that's happening. So fingers crossed, my character gets brought back. And I do a lot of audio description. So I do audio description for various TV shows. One of the shows is East New York, another show that just got canceled, but I do audio description for that. I do audio description for the show Swarm, as well as the show The Peripheral. And so that's what's happening. And just got back being a celebrity guest for D&I Con, the Diversity and Inclusion Con in Philly with Gays in Space. That was an amazing experience, sharing some celebrity con duties with Tim Russ, Robert Picardo, J.G. Hertzler, Denise Crosby, so many, Penny Johnson-Gerald from DS9, as well as the Orville, Peter Macon from the Orville, Chadwick Coleman from the Orville. It was a great weekend, and wonderful time seeing people up there. A lot of the usual suspects came by, and we saw them, got a lot of pictures. I haven't posted anything yet, but yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. Had a great weekend last weekend on the East Coast. So,
Hey, East Coast.
yay.
Nice. Well, that's great stuff. Can you tell everybody where they can find you online as well?
Sure. I am Rico Anderson is the handle. I am Rico Anderson on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, website, ricoanderson.com. A lot going on. A lot happening in the future.
Good. Well, thanks,
like,
Rico.
Subscribe. Check it out. Thank you.
Great stuff. That's I am Rico Anderson at I am Rico Anderson. All right. Muhammad knows he's got the karate chop ready. It's time
Bottom
for
line.
the terrible twos.
Line on the bottom.
The final two questions of the show, the two most important questions. And they go a little something like this. On a scale of 1 to 10, Dr. Noor of Duke University, what would you give this first episode of A Man Called Hawk, entitled The Master's Mirror?
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with what I had written down. So as I was watching the show for the first half, I was actually heading to 4, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get killed. For this. A lot of Deep Space Nine. I was like, what the heck? I was like, I'm just so lost. I don't know what's happening. Second half, I was like, I love this. And I would have given it a 9 for that. So I'm going to go kind of in the middle, but give basically, I feel like the ending is more important than the beginning. So go a little bit above the half and say 7 overall.
Interesting. What about you, Rico E. Anderson at I am Rico Anderson? What would you give this first episode on a scale of 1 to 10?
I love a good throwback. I love a good homage to all things 70s, 80s, 90s, stuff like that. Love good, cheesy 80s, 90s music, and just seeing classic characters and people that today who are, if they're still in the game, we know. And, seeing Mr. Brooks do his thing with the material that he got, and really having the opportunity to shine in that, and just really that, I liked it a lot. And through that, I want to go ahead and give it a solid 8.5. I thought it was a wonderful start. A couple of confusing situations, but it wasn't enough to make me go backwards. Again, wonderful performances from Mr. Brooks and, of course, Bondi Curtis Hall. I mean, everybody really, but just great being back in that world, the world of the late 80s, early 90s. So 8.5 for me.
Excellent. Somehow I knew you were going to an 8.5. I don't know. You set up the stage beautifully. When you said this and you said that, you kind of led us to the 8.5. However, on a scale of 1 to 10, myself, I would give this first episode of A Man Called Hawk an objective 10. There's no way you're going to get me to disrespect the emissary, the Cisco.
It's not about him.
Avery
It's also the
Brooks.
writing and the other people. It's not just about him.
It is a 10. If this was a scale of 1 to 11, I'd give it an 11.3. It's a 10. That's it. It's one of the only 10s I've ever given. I stand by it. It was so much fun. I loved every minute of it. I felt like I was exposed to something that I hadn't necessarily been exposed to. It was a lot of fun. And I felt like everything I didn't understand was my fault, or that I wasn't meant to understand yet. And
Wow.
I enjoyed it, and I'm really happy for them. And I'm sad it only seemed to have lasted 1 season. However, that's what we would give it on a scale of 1 to 10. The big question that everybody's dying to know is, for the purposes of this podcast, we all had to watch the first episode of A Man Called Hawk. But now that the podcast is over and we're free to move about the internet, Dr. Muhammad Noor, would you watch the second episode of your own volition?
Yeah. In principle, yes. I mean, I don't think I'm going to rush to do it, but in principle, yeah.
That was a quick yes.
Yep.
What about you, Rico? Would you watch the second episode of your own volition?
Oh yeah, most definitely. love a good throwback. Love good. I love to see how characters are going to develop, and this is these are investments that I would want to make. Also, this being such a precursor for all things Cisco, before badass Cisco. Hey, these are all little things that we would be seeing as we're leading into DS9 and the man that we know that we're honoring today, and all of his acting choices and character development and stuff like that. I mean, I would definitely want to see it, if anything, just to see how that development is even going to, how further it's even going to go. So I definitely check it out.
Well, I'll tell you, this thing was gritty. The setting was grimy. It was dark. It was flavorful. I feel like if the setting was a flavor of ice cream, it would be gravel. Yeah, And yes, I would watch the second episode because I liked it. And I don't necessarily need to see the character development or really need to focus on the story too much. That's icing on top of the gravel ice cream. What I really enjoyed was just the feeling, the setting, the music was so nice, was so fun, was so soulful, and I really enjoyed it. It was great to see Mr. Brooks. Yeah, I would watch it. I would watch the second episode. Absolutely. It was a good time. That's it, everybody. That's everybody in the live chat and then in the comments below. Let us know, what flavor of ice cream would you give to a man called Hawk?
Not gravel.
Maybe. It's kind of like Rocky Road.
I don't know. I tend to think that, just how like Worf likes
Rico
prune
says it's
juice.
butter rum.
No, like Worf likes prune juice. That's the last drink you would ever think a Klingon would like. For some reason, I think that Hawk would like strawberry ice cream or something crazy like that. I don't know.
Or maybe like Neapolitan, because he's like, depends on what mood I'm in. Don't put me in a box.
Right. Don't do that, baby. Don't do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Please make sure that you like this video. Give it a 5-star rating if you're listening in. Please make sure you are sending this out to your pals. You can share it on Twitter or social media, wherever you'd like. And leave us your suggestions in the comments below. Thanks very much to Rico E. Anderson for joining us today.
Thank you.
So what I'm trying to say is this podcast was gritty.
Oh, I was going to say that. This podcast was like gravel ice cream.
This podcast was like Rocky Road from the 80s going into the 90s.
When I used to get those, you go into like the drugstore and they would give you like a scoop or 2 scoops on a cone or something like that. I would always get Rocky Road and mint chocolate chip. Not a great mix, but 2 great flavors.
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Yeah, Rocky Road for me was like my thing as a teenager. I would always get like the pint. I actually had a ritual every Friday. I get a pint of Rocky Road and just
you still get a pint every Friday night, but that's different nowadays.
Not quite Rocky Road unless that flavor is out yet.
So anyway, everybody, thank you for joining us, and always remember what Mr. Michael Kenyon Rosenberg likes to say,
which is, don't forget to be an organ donor, and don't forget to watch the first of things.
And thank you to Mr. Avery Brooks. You're the best. All right, everybody. Freeze frame like you're going to be the villain in episode 2.
That shitty smile and breathe.